Happy Friday, just for Memorial Day. Mr. H here with you. How you doing? Took off last week and just went kind of cruising around. Went over to Gettysburg, down to Antietam, and been thinking about the Army of the Potomac. And I was thinking about all the various and sundry individuals they had in command of that before they finally got something under control and achieved victory down at Appomattox Courthouse. But it was not an easy ride, man. All kinds of interesting people they had in command, and it really makes you wonder what they were teaching at West Point at the time. Here we go. I got Irvin McDowell. He was the very first commander. It wasn't even called the Army of the Potomac yet. So they just sent him barreling forward towards Richmond. Everybody thought one big battle, it's over. They thought they could beat the Confederacy, who march into Richmond. Confederacy thought one big battle, and they'd march into D.C., it didn't really turn out that way. 4 years later, everybody admitted they were wrong. But Irvin McDowell, he was the first guy who was wrong. He went marching down into, Bull Run / Manassas Junction, and it did not go very well for us. Sorry, it didn't go very well for the Union. So, as you imagine, he got canned. But they didn't really fire people, except for McClellan. We'll get to him later. But they never fired people. They just transferred them somewhere else. Battle of Bull Run / Manassas Junction, as the Rebs like to call it, or as we're going to call it now, epic fail. I don't know what they were thinking, man. I mean, the Union Army was still pretty new. Confederate Army had been in existence about 10 minutes or so. Basically, it was two armed mobs slamming away at each other, and, well, the Union Army kind of fell apart and ran away. Some unreconstructed Confederate partisans have always told me that if it hadn't have rained, they would have stormed D.C. No, they would not have. I mean, this Confederate Army had been in existence for about 5 minutes. It's 26 miles, and there's 4 forts surrounding it with 75,000 troops. I mean, granted militia, but still 75,000 people fighting from under cover. Now, if you're not taking it that day, or any other day. Now, for some reason, they love Irvin McDowell in Phoenix. I have no idea why. So many roads and everything are named for him. This one's here in Scottsdale, right near where I hope they build a hockey arena one day. Over here is Main Street. It's supposed to be the gate that leads into Phoenix. It's supposed to be children playing. I don't know how you get to look at Chinese letters to me. But the main road in Phoenix is called McDowell. And yeah, they named it for Irvin McDowell. He spent a lot of the war over in San Francisco building parks. He got that right. As far as I know, he never came anywhere near Phoenix, so no idea. Here, the McDowell Sonoran Preserve. Been there. Yeah, once again, got his name. I still don't know the name of this hill, but I've been on top of it, right there. Yeah, fantastic view over there. A little on the hot side, so I go there in the winter. But say what you will about Irvin McDowell, got a bunch of fans in the Phoenix area. Now, after McDowell got sent off on, do something else, we have George McClellan. You might call him Little Napoleon or Little Mac. A little short little guy. See, he got a Napoleon thing going there with his hand. He was a very good organizer, very good trainer. The troops loved him, but he would never actually want to use his army until he got prodded. It's like you built this thing and you're scared to use it. And he always overestimated the number of soldiers he was facing. The Confederate Army in Northern Virginia, when he took over, was about 40,000 regular troops, you want to call them that, maybe another 40,000 in militia. By the time he was finishing his estimation of how many Confederate troops, they were up to over 250,000. They never had an army that big, man. So George McClellan, like I said, good organizer, good trainer. Finally, Lincoln prodded him to go do something. He said, if you don't want to use your army, could I borrow it? As you guessed, he didn't like Lincoln very much. But Abe, he thought, McClellan's my guy. Abe has a thick skin. Abe will take all sorts of insults as long as you get the job done. In fact, one time, the president here, Lincoln, and the Secretary of War, Secretary of Defense these days, Stanton, went over there to his house late at night, and he said he'll be back in a second, and he went to bed. Yeah, exactly. McClellan just went to sleep and sent one of his servants down to say the general's retired for the evening. Just leave the president and Secretary of War in his parlor. Yeah, well, like I said, Lincoln says, if you can win, I'll put up with it. Little Mac finally makes his move. So he figures there's 250,000 Confederate soldiers here. There's not even 250,000 Confederate soldiers in the entire army, but nonetheless, he thinks they're here. So he's going to go around them, land here on the peninsula here at Fort Monroe, which the Union still owned and hung on to, and he's going to march this way and go around them. Looks great on paper, but you know, somebody knows there's a bunch of ships going down the Potomac, and you see this peninsula? Yeah, remember Thermopylae? It's going to be one Thermopylae after another over here. So while that's happening, they bring John Pope down from the north, right? So while the Confederates are pinning McClellan down on the peninsula, they're going to bring John Pope down. Now, why do I want to give this guy an Ushuka right here? Because when you screw up, you're headed to Minnesota where you have to fight the Sioux. So you might as well get the right hat. It's really cold up there, don't you know? Yeah, they really talk like that. So our friend John Pope goes marching down. And guess what? Fights the Battle of Bull Run again. Bull Run 2. Manassas Junction 2. Epic Fail 2. Pick a name. Hey, and guess who came back from the west to help out? Yeah, your friend Irvin McDowell. He knew exactly where to go. Maybe you shouldn't listen to that guy. Just saying. So John Pope gets canned. They bring McClellan back from the peninsula. Peninsula campaign is a failure in more ways than one. Not only was it a failure for the Union, but this guy here, the Confederate general in charge, Joseph Johnston, he got hurt. All right, so what? He got hurt, he got wounded. Somebody else had to take over. And guess who took over the Confederate Army in Northern Virginia? Yep, this guy is going to cause a lot of problems. Robert E. Lee. So the first guy gets hurt, they bring another guy, he's even better than Johnston was. You know what this reminds me of? History kind of repeating itself. Remember, Tommy Maddox was a Steelers quarterback in 2004, got hurt against Baltimore in Game 2, then Ben Roethlisberger took over? Yeah, I'm sure there's no relationship in any way, shape, or form, but that's just kind of how my brain operates. So Little Mac's back, just in time for Lee to go up into Antietam, right? He's going to invade the north. He goes into Maryland. I was over at these places. We got the trench over here. I mean, it's not the trench. We got the Bloody Lane. See people get shot dead there. You know, blood filled that thing up. So almost had the Blood River there for a little while. Over here is Dunker Church. It's about half mile away from the Bloody Lane there. Got this picture. Looks like Matthew Brady here taking pictures even before Gettysburg. This thing here, the Dunker Church, it was a church. Dunker, people got baptized, dunking their head underwater. Do you know this thing was a cafeteria as late as the 50s? Can you imagine eating there? Somebody wounded people and blood all over the place, and eventually, 100 years later, it's a cafeteria, eating a ham and cheese sandwich where somebody was, you know, they're trying to keep somebody bleeding to death, you know? That's just weird. Well, here's Bloody Lane. I got a little, closer view of it. This is after the Confederates were driven off. The Confederates tried to hang on to it, and they couldn't do it. It's a long story about that, how they misinterpreted order to leave. They're about to get pushed out anyway. There's blood in the bottom of the whole thing. I don't see it now, but it's also a black and white photo. One of my beta readers for a book called Heaven Steel says, sounds like a place called the Trench. Do you think that's inspired by Antietam? Oh, I don't know. Maybe it is. Why don't you buy the book and find out there on Lulu.com. Epic Battle between North Marches and Kaizani. You like Russians and Mongols? That's what that's basically about. It's an awesome book. It's a great book. Buy it on Lulu.com. It's a great paperweight. Cats like to sit on it. Mr. H gets a buck. Get on it. Grab it now. Now back to our regular presentation. So after, McClellan had fought Robert E. Lee to a standstill at Antietam, but he didn't win. And Lee was also trapped against the Potomac. So had McClellan gotten over his, usual, what's he called? These called the slows. He didn't move very fast. He could have pinned him against the Potomac and maybe won. Now, McClellan, in his defense, said his army was too beat up and battered to go afterwards, and it might have been, so who knows. Nonetheless, we finally decide to sack McClellan. So who did it come up with? We got Burnside. He's famous for three things. As you guessed, the sideburns. Gotta admit, nice-looking sideburns. He's also famous for telling Lincoln he's not the man for the job. Lincoln says, yes, you are. He says, no, I'm not. If someone tells you they're not the man for the job, you should probably believe them. The third thing they're famous for, 13,000 Union casualties at Fredericksburg. Yep, in December of 1862, he tries to smash his way across a very cold river, charging into Fredericksburg, which is, on an elevated slope from said river. And it just says they almost pulled it off, but not quite. Maybe if, I don't know, they did it faster and didn't spend 2 weeks preparing directly in front of Confederate guns, it might have worked off. But nonetheless, Burnside is not the man for the job, and he quickly gets canned. Let's bring in Fighting Joe Hooker. That name always makes people laugh. Why? Let's just say he kept the troops' morale very high. Look at his name, Hooker. Think about it. Had nice young ladies visiting the troops. Think about it. He's also a clean-shaven general, odd for the Civil War, had a very bad temper. He was a very bad general. Yeah, he just wasn't very good. Why they picked this guy, I still don't know. He said he had a combative experience. Well, if you don't know what you're doing, man, all that experience is going to be used against you. Walks right into a trap at Chancellorsville. And believe me, Chancellorsville was pretty bad. The good news is they got Stonewall Jackson shot at the end of it, so, one Confederate general down, but the whole thing was a complete disaster. 130,000 man army, outnumbers Confederates 2-1, still can't win, gets shattered and driven back. So then Lee decides, while everyone is upset over Chancellorsville, he's going to charge back into the north again, going all the way into Pennsylvania. Fighting Joe Hooker, bad attitude. He resigns as Lee is crossing into PA. So they have to grab George Gordon Meade, an unsung American hero. They called him Old Snapping Turtle because, look at him, looks like a snapping turtle. This guy occupies defensive position at Gettysburg and beats Robert E. Lee. This is the first guy ever to defeat Robert E. Lee. Yeah, McClellan fought him to a draw at Antietam, but Meade actually defeated him because Meade did two things. One, he stayed on defense, right? Good terrain there, Seminary Ridge and Little Round Top and all that. And he also realized that this type of warfare was something new. Everyone's still marching around like it's Napoleonic era. He says, hey, it's not 1815 anymore, it's 1863. And he realizes modern warfare, 1863 version, is a lot different than everyone else has been doing. Now, he wins the big battle at Gettysburg, and Lincoln was upset because, once again, he felt if he came off that ridge, he could have smashed Lee when Lee was trying to retreat back into Virginia. Maybe he could, but he said, once again, his army was kind of battered and couldn't pursue. But Meade is going to remain commander of the Army of the Potomac. Always like this picture. Give me that flag. Yank it out of your hands and stomp on it. So we got Ulysses S. Grant showing up here, right? When he's not slugging whiskey there completely straight with absolutely no ice on a hot day, he's actually a very good general. Like Meade, he understands his new style of warfare, and when he goes into the wilderness, it's going to turn to a grinding preview of the First World War kind of thing. But he understands what's going on. He's willing to absorb lots of casualties. Meade remains commander of the Army of the Potomac. Ulysses S. Grant, of course, is running the entire army. Of course, he's there with Meade all the time anyway, because he's kind of a hands-on guy. So a lot of people thought he was the next commander. He wasn't. He and Meade had their disagreements, but they never let it get personal. It was just professional. At the end of the day, Grant's running the show. Meade understands this, goes forth, and they're eventually going to win the war. Now, when I was cruising around, I was thinking about terror birds. Why? I don't know. It's the first thing that came to mind. We talked about terror birds one time before, but I learned some interesting things about terror birds. Here's one standing over a Glyptodont. I don't understand why the hair is growing through the animal. I mean, the grass is growing through the animal. Do you notice that too? How long has this thing been laying around over there? Nonetheless, terror bird is very happy, triumphant. There are tons of terror birds out there. One of my favorites, Brontonius, because one of the biggest ones. Imagine this thing coming after you. All right, if you don't have a weapon, it's over. Even if you do have a weapon, it still might be over. I guess you try to shoot the thing in the head, but I mean, this thing could cover some serious ground, man. You gotta take shots at this thing a half mile out. Here's an idea: don't be around when he shows up. Terror birds coming all kinds of different sizes, as big as Brontonius was. It wasn't the biggest. Mostly South and Central American animal. They worked their way up into North America, the southern region, but not very far. We found remains in Florida, of all places, so they must have hung out there the longest before completely disappearing from North America. But as you can see, when you measure up against a 5'9" individual, no chance about fighting these things. The moa is extinct. 5'9" Homo sapiens couldn't even fight off an ostrich, man. Okay, so there's no hope against anything else. Now, the thing I learned about terror birds were their attack methods, because this has been something people have wondered about. A lot of people have been thinking, see this sharp beak here, this sharp protrusion from the beak. Yeah, it's there, it exists, we know because we got the fossils, so we know what it looks like. So some people thought you use that to come down as a stabbing tool. However, it seems that this part of the beak, right, it's hollow. So I don't think it could withstand like strikes. I don't think that's the primary weapon. This is what I think the primary weapon is. I think it's these claws on the feet, kind of like a T-Rex. See? I mean, it works. It seems to work. So the claws come down, and then the beak starts ripping you to pieces. So here's the blunt force, and here's the thing that eviscerates you. Now, it might come down a little bit, but if you come down too heavy and this thing is hollow, you could break the beak. You could break this point over here. A broken point wouldn't, be the end of this animal, but yeah, it kind of makes it harder to eat a little bit. You got to start tearing through skin and everything. So it's got to hurt too. So I think this is the primary weapon here, the feet, just like a T-Rex. Just a little bit of speculation for Mr. H. And every time I speculate, I'm usually right. Hey, let's talk about United Football League, man. You think they missed me for a week? Nah, they went on and do what they're going to do. Looks like got definite separation. We know who's going to be in the playoffs, just not sure where they're playing yet. Week 8, Michigan just took out Memphis. Michigan marching their way into the playoffs. Memphis is just going down the drain. 24-18 for Michigan. Excuse me. Birmingham, 35-28 win over Houston. Birmingham still undefeated. The last team to ever beat Birmingham were the Houston Gamblers. Yeah, it's Roughnecks before they changed the name. Still can't beat them. St. Louis eliminated D.C. from the playoff race, 26-21 game. That was a fun one to watch. I saw that one. St. Louis is first place over in the XFL conference, sharing that with San Antonio, who is keeping Arlington out of the playoffs at 1-7. They won 20-15. So we already know who's going to be in the playoffs. Right there, USFL conference. You know it's going to be Birmingham and Michigan. One more win for Birmingham. They have home field advantage. Michigan 6-2. They know who they're playing. Just trying to figure out where. Memphis and Houston, yeah, see you next year. And the XFL conference, excuse me a second. We've got St. Louis and San Antonio both tied at 6-2. They're fighting tooth and nail, fighting who gets home field advantage. Meanwhile, excuse me again. Excuse me, man. There we are. We got D.C. and Arlington down there. They're not going anywhere. So if you plan on playing in the UFL, start getting ready now because there's going to be openings on 4 different teams. So St. Louis and San Antonio, not sure where they're playing, but they're in the playoffs. Michigan, Birmingham, look like Birmingham isn't quite settled yet. Week 9 is going to roll around. We got Arlington hosting St. Louis. Arlington has got absolutely nothing to lose. So that means St. Louis could be heading into a trap. San Antonio's got Birmingham coming up. Oh, this is going to be interesting. Could they be the first one to give Birmingham a loss this year? One way to find out. Tee off the ball and kick off. Memphis and D.C. Well, nobody's playing for anything but pride here, so we're going to see who still has some pride left. Michigan playing Houston. Houston's got nothing going on. Michigan's got everything to lose. Could be a trap. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys later on. You guys have a fantastic day, and I will see you next time. Das Vidania.